Hello, my name is Isaac.
I'm Bailey.
Oh, I'm Yusuf.
I'm Lucas.
I'm Gabe.
So our group is doing Ryukyuan Japanese versus Standard Japanese, located on the island of Okinawa.
The Ryukyuan Japanese. The Ryukyuan refers to the people who reside anywhere along the Ryukyu Islands, which includes Okinawa. Residents of the Okinawa speak a certain dialect of Japanese that they refer to as the Uchinaguchi. The Okinawan language is vastly different from the standard Japanese language. And although its writing systems are the same as Japanese, there are many vocabulary differences, and we'll elaborate on the differences in later slides. So basically, this is the scattering of Ryukyuan population. The Ryukyuans are not recognized as a minority group in Japan. They're considered only as a homogeneous subgroup of the Japanese people. So currently, there are about 2 million Ryukyuan people scattered across the globe, and the descendants of the original Ryukyuan people native to the Ryukyuan Islands have migrated to different parts of the world. Surprisingly, the second largest diaspora resides in the South American countries such as Brazil and Peru. So here I have two pictures of the Ryukyuan people. The first one is when they're in their original Japanese residence, and the second one is the imaginary reportrations of the Ryukyuan male. So some of the Ryukyuan people also migrated to other parts of Asia, but mainly islands in the Indian Ocean, such as the ones in near Taiwan and Japan, also the Philippines as well. We'll mention later in the project that the Ryukyuan people do not communicate in their original Okinawan language, and they have adapted to their local linguistic environment, which contributed to the language loss and shift of the Okinawan language.
So we're gonna talk over the history of Okinawa. Okinawa itself, it used to be an independent country, but after the invasion of Satsuma in 1609, the Ryukyu Islands were taken over by Japan's shogunate system. So at this point, even though the Okinawan island, like the communities, they're under the rule of Japan, they still have a uniqueness to them, an Okinawan dialect. But after World War II, there was a stronger push for Okinawan residents to assimilate into mainstream Japanese culture, and because of this, it resulted in a language shift away from their original language of Uchinaguchi, and from then on until recently, there's been a steady decline in speakers of the Okinawan language. So currently, most Japanese people in the mainland, like, they view Okinawan people as more relaxed and laid back due to the nature of their language, their dialect. But the mainlanders, for the most part, they see Okinawan people as part of the Japanese country, and mainland schools, they go to Okinawa for historical field trips just to show that they see it as part of Japan. But on the Okinawan side, there's a lot more enthusiasm in the revitalization of Uchinaguchi, and there's a lot of public events that are encouraging the use of their original language.
So moving on to Ryukyuan slang, there's a popular slang or phrase used by the younger generation called it sounds like namkuru naisa. It basically refers to how as long as you do good things, you'll receive good things in life, and it's used in conversation and in passing, just and as reasoning for how and serves as an expression on how, as long as you act morally, you'll be able to reap the rewards for it later in life. And this tweet it has the phrase on top and just explains what it means at the bottom. So this tweet shows how a couple Okinawans actually decorated their chair with the phrase, and it shows how, being Okinawans, they took the phrase as part of their identity and were able to take pride in that, and going so far as to decorate their things, and so that other Okinawans would be able to unify with that and identify with it as part of their identity. Additionally, other companies have been able to adopt the phrase since they recognize that so many Okinawan people use the phrase. So here is an example of Coca-Cola taking the phrase and using it to advertise one of their new brands of Coca-Cola. So in their promotional material, they will use the slogan on the top as a hashtag on Twitter and use that to market their Coca-Cola towards other Okinawans who are meant to recognize the phrase. So here is a brief conversation between music teachers, and it shows how distinct Ryukyuan Japanese is in comparison to standard Japanese.
오늘 훈련이요. 우리 수수 때문에 우리가 사고를 한 봐. 시간이 시겠다. 1시간 만에 수수지 우리 비게 우리 한 봐.
우리가 지금 손짓이 서고도 미미카라 약간 그리카라 손짓이 서고도 아치라 오케토리 삼바에서야.
오늘 후비란 말을 후비란 또고이 수고 아서전 딱지 순시네요. 나만 이제 아시부미 좋다이.
フォー置いてからがいいというわけか。
フォーもきちんと
入れてから。
もうフが5歳ね、すごく5が指に3時ずつがね。これフ見たらもうすごい指がずつがね、マジで素数的に。俺がさ、1時間目のあっちを。あっちからね、朝どんとかしてね、すごい指が、マジただは時間、フビラチからアバカツにしね、あまじなはちやすぐみ状態。
実践すぐそんちちしね。
前に絶対進まん。あそことなら市場時が運動させるま。
안 돼 민나.
So here you can tell that despite speaking Ryukyuan Japanese, they take some aspects from standard Japanese and incorporate that into it, and it creates an extremely distinct variation of Japanese that's a hybrid, and the part of their identity comes from the uniqueness of their language.
Alright, so next I'm gonna give some examples of what standard Japanese is versus the Ryukyuan Japanese. So the first example in Ryukyuan Japanese is Nichi du takara. As for in Japanese, you would say inochi ga takara, and this means life is the treasure, or life is a treasure in English. Now, in many Japanese dialects, or some ways of saying Japanese language, some parts of the word are omitted, which makes the way a person talks come off as more informal and relaxed. That's why inochi is just pronounced as nuchi, and the particle du is used because that particle exclusively appears in the Okinawan dialect. Another example is churaumi, which is the Okinawan. As for in Japanese, it would be utsukushii umi, and in English, it would be the beautiful sea. Now, chura or chura-san is a word that is commonly used in Okinawan culture that depicts something that is revered as important or pretty, which is what the ocean is to them. Now this is why only that adjective is changed from utsukushi to chura and is replaced, and the word ocean, umi, remains the same. And then some more examples include uchinaguchi, which is their way of referring to their dialect. As in Japanese, they say Okinawa no hogen, which is just Okinawan dialect in Japanese. Now, uchi is a dialectal way of saying watashi, which is referring to oneself, like I or my in English. But by using this dialectal version of this possessive pronoun, the Okinawan people are claiming that this language is that of their people. Like they're claiming it as one of their own, like it's their language. And then the final example is Minchu, and in Japanese it's ryoshi, which is fisherman in English. Now, uminchu, I thought this was an interesting word because umi means ocean, so I looked it up and I found that it directly translates to man of the sea, which is like, instead of just translating to fisherman, although fisherman is what the phrase is referring to, so I thought that was interesting.
To wrap up our project, we did a random anonymous survey to collect some data on how often people speak Uchinaguchi. So what we did was we reached out to Japanese nationals that we knew over social media, and we asked them a series of questions. We started off with questions like, where were you born? Where do you live now? How many of your parents and grandparents were Okinawan? Just to make sure that we were getting the demographic that we wanted, which was Okinawans. However, due to the limited time we had with the project and the limited number of Japanese acquaintances we were able to come in contact with, we only had a few responses, and we had a very narrow demographic surveyed. All of the people who responded were Okinawan males in their 20s to 20s that were either in college or just starting their careers. So here's some of the data we collected. This first question asks, when you were a child, how often did you hear Okinawan or Uchinaguchi spoken in your home? 2/3 of the respondents said that they never heard it, and 1/3 said that they heard it sometimes or rarely. And the second question down below says, when you were a child, how often did you hear it spoken outside of your home? 1/3 said often, and 2/3 said rarely. So you can see here that in the individuals that we were able to interview, most of them heard Uchinaguchi spoken more outside their home than inside their home. The next two questions are the same, except instead of when you were growing up, looking at now. So the first question is, now, how often do you hear Uchinaguchi spoken in your home? Again, 2/3 said never, and 1/3 said rarely. And then the second question down below is, outside your home, how often do you hear Uchinaguchi? And 2/3 said sometimes, and 1/3 said never. And then the final three questions were, you yourself, how often do you speak it? 2/3 said never, 1/3 said rarely. Then in the bottom left, have you ever been to a language revitalization event or an event whose purpose was to spread the use of Uchinaguchi? 2/3 said they had never been, and 1/3 said they had. And then the final question, which is over here on the right, said, how often, or have you ever studied Uchinaguchi on your own? And 1/3 said no, and the other 2/3 said yes. So you can see through our survey, because of the limited number of people that we were able to interview with the survey, we didn't really observe any strong correlations. If we had more time and were able to reach more people, especially in a wider demographic, then we'd get some more usable data on how much Uchinaguchi is actually spoken in Okinawa and how people use it, if they use it more in their home or outside with their friends at work, school, etc.